Hello, everyone. Today we are picking up Paul's story at the end of chapter 25, beginning at verse 23, and we will be reading all the way through to the end of chapter 26. Paul has been in prison now for more than 2 years, as the Roman bureaucracy has been stalled by how multiple governors don't really know what to do with him. Now, the proverbial logjam will break for Paul in today's reading. We were introduced to Festus, the new governor, at the beginning of chapter 25. Paul had what you might call a procedural hearing with Festus regarding where his case should be tried. That hearing did not give Paul a chance to really speak to the charges that the Jews have against him. This is the day that Paul will finally get to speak. So we pick up the story at verse 23, where we read this. So the next day, Agrippa and Bernice arrived at the auditorium with great pomp, accompanied by military officers and prominent men of the city. Festus ordered that Paul be brought in. Then Festus said, "King Agrippa and all who are here, this is the man whose death is demanded by all the Jews, both here and in Jerusalem. But in my opinion, he has done nothing deserving death. However, since he appealed his case to the emperor, I have decided to send him to Rome. But what shall I write the emperor? For there is no clear charge against him. So I have brought him before all of you, and especially you, King Agrippa, so that after we examine him, I might have something to write. For it makes no sense to send a prisoner to the emperor without specifying the charges against him." What happens next is that Paul shares his witness. He explains that he was a Pharisee and that he was an active enemy of the Christians. He tells a story about his experience with Jesus on the road to Damascus and how that changed the course of his life. At this point in the story is when I want you to see the subtle shift. As Paul began, you might have thought that he was talking about himself. As we keep reading, though, we realize that the way Paul's really telling the story is that he is a character in God's story. Paul is sharing what God has done in his life, but it is God who is the one that's been taking all the action. Paul says that Jesus gave him direction, and that he's merely fulfilling those instructions. Listen to this. At verse 19, Paul says this, "And so, King Agrippa, I obeyed that vision from heaven." Often, people will tell the story about how God has changed their lives, and that is certainly a part of what Paul is doing here. But the big difference is that God's intervention in Paul's life was not for the sake of Paul, but rather for the mission of God. Paul's life was transformed by God's intervention, not merely as a blessing for Paul, but so that Paul could be a blessing to others. That concept has been foundational to God's work in the world from the very beginning. In Genesis chapter 12, we read this, "I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others." In the next verse we read, "All the families on earth will be blessed through you." Abraham has a story that the Old Testament tells us. Paul has a story that the New Testament tells us. And God has given each of us a story to tell as well. But we need to remember why we have that story and whose story it really is. Have a great day, everyone.
If these devotional videos are helpful to you, subscribe to our channel and click the notification button so you know when we post a new video. And of course, please share them with others.